welcome to this timely Fireside Chat. My name is Aniekeme Umoh. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Miva Open University, a part of the uLesson group. Today, we have a Fireside Chat on a timely topic. But before we go into that, I'd like you to know what Miva Open University is. We are Nigeria's first private operational online or open distance university. We have over 20,000 students enrolled, and we have programs across undergraduate and postgraduate. We host events like these: entrepreneurs in residence, master classes, fireside chats, because Miva Open University is at the center of the cultural zeitgeist and at the forefront of academic discourse. So thank you so much for joining us. We here are coming to you from our Miva Open University Center in Lagos, Nigeria. So if you're in Lagos, you can check us out in Yaba. For our online audience, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to kick off the fireside chats now, right? So today's conversation is a really important one: reforms and the economic prospects in Nigeria. And anchoring this conversation are two powerhouses, Shagaya and Ugochukwu, Obi-Chukwu, also known as Ugodre. So I'll just read the intros. I think that these two men, they don't really need to be introduced, but for the sake of the formality, and the few people who may not know who they are, I'm going to do some quick intros. And I won't do justice to your intros, but just please accept what I'm reading. All right. Okay, so Shagaya is a celebrated Nigerian entrepreneur and investor, known for his visionary leadership in technology and education. He's the founder and group CEO of the uLesson Group and Chancellor of Miva Open University. He previously led Google's Africa operations and built companies including eMotion, DealDay, Konga, one of West Africa's largest e-commerce platforms. He founded uLesson in 2019, now one of Africa's leading edtech companies, and launched Miva Open University in 2023. This is Nigeria's fastest growing university, which today serves more than 20,000 learners across Nigeria and beyond. Sim studied at George Washington University, Dartmouth College, Harvard Business School, and has been recognized by CNBC and Forbes for his impact and leadership across Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Ugodre is the founder and CEO of Nairametrics Financial Associates. Nairametrics Financial Advocates.
Advocates, yeah. Thank you.
A leading authority in Nigeria's financial and economic sectors. A chartered accountant with extensive experience, Ugodre has spearheaded significant business transformations and strategic reorganizations, enhancing operational efficiency and profitability. His experience in covering the capital markets, the economy, and geopolitics makes him one of the leading resource persons for delivering macroeconomic insights. His leadership at Nairametrics has transformed the platform into a globally recognized source for economic analysis and financial literacy. Ugodre is an eloquent speaker and host of popular financial radio shows on Lagos Talks 91.3 FM and Classic FM 97.3. Ugo also hosts several influential podcast shows covering the capital markets and investor education. His influential work in the financial sector has earned him several awards and recognitions. Thank you so much for joining us, Ugodre.
Thank you for that.
All right. Okay, so let's get into the conversation. Quick framing for everyone who's joining us, the few people here in person, the people online. Reforms are never easy, but we know that they're necessary, right? So today, as we unpack what's changing, why it matters, what the next decade might look like as a result of the reforms that we're seeing today, let's start with some framing around what are the most important reforms that are currently shaping Nigeria's economy. So, Ugo, if you want to start.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here at the Miva Open University. And of course, seeing everybody here. I hope that you can see the guys here as well. Absolute pleasure. And I hope to be your student one of these days too. And we're all learning, aren't we? All right, great. So, to your question, yeah. So, I mean, there are two, big prongs of reforms that we're undergoing in Nigeria at the moment, and you want to put them into two buckets. One is fiscal policy reforms, and the other is monetary policy reforms. And the one that we kind of like feel the impact the most is monetary policy reforms. I mean, we do feel fiscal policy. In fact, we do actually feel both of them. So let me give you a practical example of what each of those reforms really mean. So fiscal policy reforms is usually government initiated reforms. And so those are reforms that often have to do with government spending, how government generates revenue like taxes, and then, laws that impact businesses, or, whether they're trying to perhaps push one sector of the economy forward, or have us focus on one sector of the economy. So that is typically fiscal reforms. Then monetary policy reforms is usually spearheaded by the central bank, right? And so, that would have to do with interest rate, and how they want to combat inflation. And so as a practical example, one of the very first fiscal policy reforms of this current government, right, since I guess we're talking about now, is the fuel subsidy removal.
Right.
So that was like the very first, because for decades, the major fiscal policy, one of the major underlying fiscal policy of previous government has always been to subsidize, fuel, right? Because it's very populist, and the masses tend to like it, right? But it does has its major disadvantages, which we've talked about severally over the years on, nationally as a country. And so the pressure has been to take that subsidy off. And what it meant was, because you're taking fuel subsidy off, then it means that frees up a lot of revenue for government, right? And then it also, on the other side, piles pressure on you and I, because now we're paying a lot more for fuel. And so that is why immediately that policy was unleashed, the pain was that we saw fuel price go from, I think, 140 or so to like over 1,000 at some point, right? So that is how fiscal policy can impact everyone, right? Then, but on the other side too, you also see that state governments have a lot of money now. A lot of people don't seem to talk about that a lot, because what we call FAC allocation, which is how governments share money, like the federal government and states share money, they used to share like 800 billion or so, 900 billion on average before 2023. But now these guys are sharing like 2 trillion.
Right.
So the states actually have a lot more cash now than before. So a lot of people don't seem to realize that, at the moment. So that is how fiscal policy can affect all of us. And of course, taxes and all that, which I guess we'll probably get to later. Right. Now, the monetary policy, the very first one was the exchange rate devaluation, right? I'm sure you felt that, right? You did. Everybody did feel that one, because we also, the naira versus the dollar go from 750 in the black market to at some point 1.8.
Yes.
So that is also because of monetary policy reform. So the central bank decided they were not going to support, because over the years, just like fuel subsidy, Nigeria has had the policy of having a fixed exchange rate, which the government tries to control, which is another form of subsidy in itself. And so they said, you know what, we're not doing that anymore. We're just going to let the currency at least free, right? And so when they took that decision, it was a nosedive, and that is an example of the impact of monetary policy. Of course, there are several other aspects to it, but I think these are just the basic ones for the sake of the audience.
Right. Thank you so much. So you talk about the fuel subsidy removal, FX, the central bank deciding that floats the naira against the dollar, essentially, no longer subsidizing that. Tim, is there anything else you want to add in terms of framing?
Yeah, no, I think Ugodre framed it really well. I mean, I kind of, so I think it's very technically accurate to frame it in terms of sort of monetary and fiscal reforms. I look at it through the lenses, maybe as more of a layman, of how much pain those reforms cost and how necessary they were, which are two sides of the same coin.
Right.
So the way I kind of think about it is kind of like tier 1 and tier 2 reforms. And the tier 1 reforms are the things he spoke about just now. So the fuel subsidy removal and the elimination of this sort of parallel exchange rate.
Yes.
And both of those cause a lot of pain. But then there's a second tier, I think, that is causing, I think, not as much pain, but I'm actually quite excited by them. So those would be things like everything and anything around trying to bring the power sector on an even keel. So there are all kinds of constipations and blockages in the value chain, the gas producers being owed all kinds of money, subsidies on electricity tariffs that have been lifted. And I guess a part of that, Ugodre, would be the decentralization of power generation, transmission, and the entire value chain to the states. So that's a really big one that I'm really excited about, because I think one of the biggest breaks on this economy is power and energy. And then, of course, there's insurance reforms that are coming through, and the tax reforms we were just talking about. So there's this whole, I mean, it's really been like a dizzying pace of of reforms over the past 2 years. A lot of these, I mean, I don't know if it's too early to put an editorial voice on it, but I think a lot of them were necessary. You could, and I'm sure we'll get into this, you could debate whether adequate mitigation was put in place, and the sequencing of it, and the tactics of it, and whether the final details were tweaked appropriately. My sort of bird's eye view is like a lot of these were necessary.
So following that line of thinking, can you share some more about how you considered the short-term real pain that the reforms have caused, perhaps by not having mitigations in place, against and sequencing, like you mentioned, putting that side by side with what you think is the long-term, or what you expect will be the long-term gain from these reforms. We're starting to see some of it now, but what do you envision is going to happen, and how do you place that side by side?
I just want to make this conversation really exciting to have Ugodre here. I mean, by the way, I'm a big fan.
Same here. Dito.
Incredible analysis, really dispassionate stuff, very intelligent content. And I'm sure he'll bring a much more technical light on this, but I'm much more like a student of history. And so I paid a lot of attention to sort of the economic trajectory and development of countries like India and Brazil, and there are a few analogs here or there, but if you pay enough attention to sort of history, you see that there's really no way that Nigeria, so these reforms I think actually are insufficient. Necessary, but insufficient. There's no way we could have realized our full potential as a country while subsidizing consumption of energy, at least that type of consumption. Just because of the particular nuances of our government. I mean, I think the federal government and its the whole machinery realized that it just can't administer subsidies. This is very clear. And this applies to power, and it applies to petrol. They're just really not very good at administering subsidies. So you kind of have to get rid of And so, that was a big realization. But I think if you look at sort of what we went through, India went through very similar reforms, I think about 18 years ago, 18 years ago. And that set in motion a lot of the growth that we've seen in that country.
Right.
I see them as necessary. It was very painful. I think all of us in this room, to some degree, are privileged, so perhaps we didn't feel the pain as much as most.
Yeah.
But I think we all felt some.
Painful.
Yes, it was still painful. But it set the stage for a lot of opportunity for Nigeria. And actually, even people that I think are more well off felt it. You can tell, like traveling out of the country and consuming some of these foreign side, going on vacation and tourism has become much more expensive.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
Nigerians are now rethinking a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So, we felt those things. But I see them as necessary, and I just, when something is necessary, my approach to it is just get it done, yank the bandage off. Ugodre might disagree, actually. I'd be very interested to hear. I would rather just high pace of reforms, yank the bandage off, it's necessary,
And
let's get the economy going. But I also said that these are just a subset of, I think there's more that needs to be done. I hope we get a chance to talk about that.
Yes.
The whole gamut of things are not done yet.
Okay. Right. Yes, we'll come back to what more needs to be done, because that would be really interesting to hear. But I think, Ugodre, if you can chime into this same question that Sim just responded to, but also like talk about how the reforms have been perceived internationally, in addition to locally, what we've experienced.
I mean, very, very divergent perceptions. So depending on who you're talking to, I mean, by virtue of what we do, we tend to interact with a lot of people, and so we have seen different reactions from different people. So let's start with outside Nigeria. So most of the international community, whether it's institutions like the IMF, World Bank, whether it's rating agencies, people who are like looking at Nigeria outside in, the feedback is, wow, the pace of your reforms is incredible, right? So you're able to push through all these things within 2 years, which is tough, man. Even me, I'm like, I don't know how this country, how we survive these. Like, how could you survive subsidy removal, electricity reforms, which means, because they also took out a partial removal of subsidy for electricity as well. So that sort of went up. Exchange rate devaluation also happened all in one, like within like 2 years. And
it was a lot.
Yes. And then, after reforms, most of the income comes like later.
Yes.
Right. So the salary increases happened, a lot more. Minimum wage was just maybe early this year or late last year or something like that. So that happened much later. So outside, they're actually quite shocked with the level of reforms that we had and the pace. And in fact, what would surprise you to note is they're like, with all these reforms, maybe you guys should have been a lot more palliatives. We like to use that word here. I mean, a lot more, softening and all that, like, giving the poor a lot of, because the bad thing with reforms, or the downside of reforms, is that when reforms is really, really hard hitting, like we've done, it can actually affect growth, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't have an economy when you don't have people that can spend in that economy, or people that can participate in that economy, whether because they need to buy things or purchase items or spend. Like economic activity is sort of like that. And so if you push that sort of hard reforms and people can't spend, or people are even pushed a lot more into poverty, then that can even worsen things. And so that was their own concern. Now, locally, it now depends on, like, if you're looking at maybe the 1% of the 1%, so-called 1% people like Sim, they tend to like, so they understand reforms, right? Yeah. most of us do understand these reforms and why they're important. But if you're talking to the guy on the street, man, whether it's the keke guy or even the pensioner and all that, it's tough for them. And that's because here's one secret a lot of people don't often know. When an economy is going through transformation, economic transformation like reforms, new money is being made. New billionaires are minted. New millionaires are minted. Billionaires often even get richer. It's just the way capitalism works. Because you're essentially disrupting the fundamental fabric of your economy. And so when that disruption happens, money just starts to reallocate, and then people in vantage positions take very good advantage, right? And then, so new wealth is being created. That's what tends to happen. So because of that construct, people who are already like exposed, you don't even need to be very rich, you just need to be exposed to, these economic agents, they can be richer. Yeah, take advantage, and then, man, their life just changes. There's some people that you see today. I've spoken to people who are like, Omoh, as bad as things were, man, this has been like the best 3 years of my life.
I've heard that.
Oh.
Yeah, I've seen, like, if you speak to exporters today, there's hardly any exporter that I've spoken to that haven't told me that, man, this naira should just be 2,000, I beg. Like 2,500, right? Because when they export, they earn more in naira.
Right.
Do you understand? So there are people that it worked really hard for, but for people that are really poor, it isn't, because it's a lot more difficult. So these ones are struggling to even find food to eat.
Yeah.
Before you even talk of to even find investments to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really where the divide is. But for people who are in an advantageous position, it's been great. I mean, let me give you another example. The stock market has done so well in the last year and a half. It's incredible. Like, some people will say, well, adjust it for dollar, it's not that good. Who cares? It has done well relatively in naira terms. Investments have been so good. In the last 2 years, we've not seen risk-free money, like interest rate for treasury bills, for FGM bonds, for like risk-free government rates at 25%. Imagine that you just give somebody 10 million naira to maybe put in treasury bills or some of this risk-free rate, and you're getting 2.5 million without breaking a sweat. As in, no issues. You know how much it will take you to make 25% if you're doing real business. So anybody with a float, exactly, makes even more. So that's what tends to happen when you're doing this sort of reforms. Yeah. So that's why I tell most guys earlier, I was like, rather than complain, you better find where you make your own money. You know what I mean? So that's what happens. But it's been painful for a lot of people, and let's not discard that. And it will remain like that for some people for quite some time. That is why the government also, which I guess we'll talk about at some point, we need to now start to go from reform mindset. Like I said, 2 years ago was reform. This year was meant to be stability, right? In terms of these reforms, which I think we've largely seen, because you've seen inflation has sort of is trending downwards.
Yes.
You would agree prices are still high, which is sticky, but they are not increasing as much as they were 2 years ago. Like 2 years ago, if you enter here and you ask for this bottle of water and they tell you it's 10 naira, by the time you go out and come back, it's 15 naira. I just price them now. You do the market woman will tell you, okay, you don't change. Buy them now as you see them. But it's not like that again. Right. So which means you can see that there's a lot more stability. So next year, we all want growth, because growth is the only time that people that are down the ladder will feel it, will feel these reforms. If there's no growth, they won't feel it too.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is growth of the economy, because
Yes.
Okay.
So growth means businesses are now producing more. So because a lot of the businesses today, a lot of the successes you've seen with businesses today is because they've been able to adjust price upwards.
Right.
Right. So if you speak to any manufacturer or whatever, we've seen their revenues go up, but it's because they increase prices.
Right.
Which is part of what I was always saying again about capitalism and what it does when you're doing reforms. Because once everybody's increasing the price, you increase your price now. You have to be stupid not to increase your price. So everybody's increasing prices. So, but it's enough now. So you now need to see volume growth. And when you're seeing volume growth, then it means that people are now consuming. And when people are consuming, businesses can now employ more. And when businesses employ more, then wages can go up, then consumption increases, and it keeps grinding on each other, and then people start to feel it. Which is why I often say the next big thing that needs to happen now is consumer credit. It's inevitable. Like there are a lot of fintechs, banks that are positioning already, because consumer credit has to be the next thing to kick in.
Right.
Think about it. The young graduate, you just graduated from school, you just got a job, maybe somewhere in Lekki or VI as well, where most business, or even Yaba. You need to, maybe you live in Yanokpaja or something. You want to live close to the office. How are you going to pay rent? How are you going to be able to buy a car? Because rent prices are more than tripled or quadrupled, still going up. It's a lot more expensive to buy a car now because subsidy for exchange rate has been taken off. Credit card now comes in. So that's why abroad, that economy is driven by credit. Exactly. Because you can't expect a young graduate to just look for 3 million and pay for rent. No. Exactly. So it has to be like monthly and all that. And so that's credit, because that's what credit is, the lifeblood of an economy. Right? Because it provides the liquidity that makes the economy work, make it thick. And so that's what needs to happen now. And if you also look at the fiscal reforms I talked about earlier, one of the major ones as well has been credit reforms. So people also have been sleeping on that. There's a lot of credit reforms going on. There's a credit guarantee company that has been set up. There's a credit corporation set up. They are strengthening all of them. They're recapitalizing all of them, because they know that if you don't have an economy that is credit driven, you're going to create more problem down the line for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Big problem. So that has to happen. And open banking and all that, they're all gradually being set up so that credit can flow. Because if I can lend money to you without asking for a collateral, then it means there's something that I have on you that would deter you from not wanting to pay me back. And that is your identity. So identity now becomes an asset.
Yeah.
Right. And once identity is an asset, it is because they have your information, they have your NIN, they have your bank, everything is tied. And if you cannot repay your loans, then you don't exist in this sort of economy. So that's what's going to happen next.
Yeah. That was a phenomenal response. So many things that you said in there were really informative and like really resonate. I know that when you mentioned credit, at Miva, so you might be aware, we're speaking with the credit court that's been established to want the CEO to come have a conversation with the Miva students as well, because it's really, really, really important. Sim, so I want to kind of take some of what Ugodre has said. You're not a regular Nigerian in the sense of
No, wait, take it as a positive. So take it, claim
positive,
it.
very positive. I want to get your take on what additional signals you would be looking out for that would indicate that the economy is starting to stabilize. Maybe in addition to some of what was already mentioned, but also what do you think? And I said the thing about you're not a regular Nigerian, because what do you think the regular Nigerian needs to know in this like financial and fiscal literacy that might be missing that could help a typical Nigerian weather the storm of these reforms and take advantage of the growth that should come afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I feel like there's a whole raft of other issues that the ordinary Nigerian is dealing with right now that they're contending with. Some of them are not even necessarily economic. And so, security and things like that. But to the degree that it is economic, I mean, if you just look at the basket of what the Nigerian household is spending money on, I mean, food is still a major issue here. Yeah. And so I think for the average person, all of these terms, deficits and inflation rates, stock prices and indices and things don't really mean much to
When
And
you're just trying to eat food.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think what folks like that want to see is inflation in the what would be spectacular is sub 10% inflation. For those people. Yeah, we're already at 16.05.
Yeah, 16.05. Yeah.
16.05.
Down from like 33
Yeah,
something.
down from 32, 33 a year ago or something like that. So it's dropped tremendously. People just want to be able to, and I think once you have that, if food prices can kind of stabilize, that's really tied to security also.
Yeah.
Then you start to see disposable income maybe start to grow on top of that. So what's the average person concerned with food?
Mhm.
I need a job that can pay a living wage. Because I still think that, and I'm not sure the math will add up, maybe Ugodre will tell us, because I still don't think the minimum wage is
Sufficient.
Meaningful, yeah.
living expenses in Nigeria. But for me personally, I'm a businessman. And so what I do is I talk to a lot of sort of fellow business people, not just in Lagos, but across the country. And I'm asking questions, and a lot of it is anecdotal. I know it's not scientific, but are your trading volumes increasing?
Mm.
If you're a logistics company, are you carrying more?
Right.
And the answer I'm getting uniformly from pretty much everybody except in the agricultural sector is yes.
Mm.
Things are going better. My friends that are insurance brokers are writing more policies. Logistics companies are carrying more freights.
Mm.
This is across the board. But when it's pretty much uniform. But when I talk to folks that are farmers or that are kind of connected to agriculture, the sentiment is completely different.
I see.
And I think some of that has to do with security. And I think there was some flip flop on imports policies with respect to food imports that kind of dropped food prices and hurt local farmers.
Yeah.
That definitely came through a lot from a lot of the farmers I'm listening to.
Right.
Outside of that sector, though, the sense is that things are improving.
Mm.
And I think they only come to the fore maybe 2-3 quarters later. So if some of this sentiment, continues. So I listened to Ugodre and his colleagues and his crew on Nairametrics a lot. So I won't say they encourage me to, because they're very clear about the fact that you make your own financial decisions. So I followed them into the stock market very aggressively. And I bought a peak. Something for it. But no, that's fine. I mean, I kind of think long term with respect to equity is not such a problem. But I think that a lot of these numbers that I'm seeing when I talk to logistics companies that are servicing bigger FMCG, I think they're going to work their way through the economy over the next sort of 2-3 quarters. So all in all, I'm pretty optimistic actually, and we're seeing it here.
Yeah.
I mean, we run Miva University together. It's not just pent up demand. If you look at just the growth that we've seen, I feel like education is a proxy for hope and aspiration. If there was no hope and aspiration, you just wouldn't. I mean, there's some mature sort of developed economies where schools are shutting down.
Yeah.
Here, there's pent up demand for education. And I think that says
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that you even mentioned you're kind of leaning in the direction that I'm wanting us to go. Where do you think there's the intersection between economic reform and education reform? And where do you think that education becomes a signal or a multiplier for economic reform?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll answer that question a bit differently. I was talking to an individual who's very well respected. Pretty much everybody here knows the person. He spent a lot of, a former governor of Lagos.
Okay.
Fashola specifically, let me just call it. And his thesis is a lot of some of these things. So if you look at education, for example, there's very little actually that the federal government can do. A lot of that power, especially as it pertains to basic education, is in the hands of the states.
Yeah.
Yes. So, the quality of education to a large degree is just strictly a function of the quality of leadership. if leadership is not good, it really doesn't matter what sort of macroeconomic framework or where you fall on the spectrum of, how you run your, your political economy. If your leadership is bad, your leadership is bad. This is Fashola's, this is Governor Fashola's thesis. And you have to agree, actually. Ugodre just mentioned there are states. There's no state in Nigeria now that is not getting at least double what they were getting.
Yeah.
3 years ago, in fact, in federal allocation. The question is, what are those funds being put towards? And so this same question in terms of just quality of leadership, then all these things are interconnected. There's macroeconomic reforms, there's also political governance reforms, which we can talk about.
Right.
The most notable one right now, which I think is just so self-evident, is in terms of just get it done, the state police. I don't see why we're debating this. But the fear of people who push back against state police, for example, is that this will be abused by the executive governments. But they're just like power, just like multiple exchange rates resolving that, just like subsidy, whether it's electricity or petrol. I don't see how you take the brakes off of the Nigerian economy without resolving security. And I don't see how you do that without decentralized police. So again, that's a debate. I'm not clear how you deal with that. I would love to get your perspective on this. Straight political government.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
Yeah, you kind of have to.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they're one and the same. How does the Farmer and Plateau State produce
without security?
Without security.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you're worried about just going 30 kilometers outside of Jos or Makurdi, talk less of 100 kilometers out, then how do you produce? What are you producing? So there's still a number of reforms that are left that I think impact the economy. They're not directly economic. And they also speak to this just quality leadership. That we're just missing. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're an advocate for decentralized power or restructuring, whatever that means, or whether it's a centralized federation or decentralized confederacy, or we're more on the left or the right or socialist or capitalist. This is one thing that we haven't quite
figured out.
Yeah, it's just in absolute terms, just the quality of leadership remains a problem.
Okay. You've given us like a picture of, we're talking about like economic reforms, and it is all of these additional reforms around it that need to take place.
Yes.
So Ugodre, would you like to speak to a similar question, or is it in the same like vein of what else needs to be happening in the margins while economic reforms kind of taking place in the center?
I mean, we're just at the second phase of some of these reforms, like I mentioned. So you've seen a lot of laws being passed. You've seen the Security and Exchange Commission Act signed. You've seen NIRA, that's the Insurance Act, signed. You've seen even the Constitution amended for electricity, to decentralize electricity to states. You've seen a number of regulations as well. You've seen the tax reform bill that is kicking in next year. So there are a lot of things that has happened on the fiscal side that you will start to see it go into action next year. But before I even get into that, to Sim's point, if we do not handle security or insecurity, as some would like to call it, and geopolitics, I think that it could threaten the direction of our reforms. And you've already seen what has happened over the last few weeks with just rhetoric from the American president and how that essentially is impacting, the country in general, whether it's economically or politically or even security wise. So geopolitics is also very important, and that is, how the Americans are, playing with the, or jostling with the Chinese and the Europeans for mineral resources in Africa and all that. That's got to be one thing that we've got to pay attention to as well. I think the government is also paying a lot of attention to that, because all of a sudden they now realize, hey, as much as you're doing a lot of your domestic reforms, you also have to pay attention to what's happening outside you. And so insecurity is very important. I think that a lot of what I guess the current government may have wanted to do in terms of insecurity and reforms in that space, I don't think they have the political capital to do it yet.
I see.
And that's why I think maybe that's not happening, because I think if you go by some of the utterances of this current president years ago when he was governor, even when he was in a position, he's always been someone that has liked decentralized things, maybe like devolution of powers to the states and all of that. So you would think that naturally, state policing and all that would be one of those things that he might want to push. And I suspect that might happen if he does win second term. Might be one of those things that he might want to do. State policing is for a country that is multi-cultural and have a lot of ethnic groups. Yeah, it does make some sense, and there are risks. Yeah, in terms of state governors turning it into their own private machinery. But there are also ways of, there's no way you don't have risk, and there are ways of mitigating those things. So for example, in some countries, policing is community based, really. Like maybe, just that we use the US a lot. I don't like using the US as an example, but that's mostly what we do have. But if you look at them, for example, it is basically, communities that elect who their sheriffs will be, so everybody knows who the policeman is in the community and it's not like it's a state governor that will come and impose who the sheriff will be. But some argue that that would have been what local government and would have been, but today is the state governor that imposes. But you know what? It's all part of nation building, and we just need the fundamentals to be there. So that handles security. But other than that, I think education plays a key role in all of this, which is, I guess, going back to your original question. I've always said one of the areas in the sectors in the economy where you need to start to see growth start to expand faster, because I was even checking growth numbers GDP wise, is education, and it's not going as fast as I expect, because I think that with the sort of youth population we have and the sort of demand for our skill set, right? See, when I talk about geopolitical, it's not just about mineral resources alone, it's also about human resources.
Doctors.
The West, they are aging.
Yes.
Southeast Asia, they've got an aging population.
And low birth.
Europe as well, they're aging as well, and they also have a population that probably doesn't have the sort of drive and tenacity that we have here. We have a lot of young people here, and I believe that they're going to be the drivers of labor globally,
right?
Particularly Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and some parts of Asia like India. We have a lot of young people. Average age in Nigeria is like 17, 18, right? For young people. So these guys are going to need to be educated for them to not just serve Nigeria as an economy, but the world as well. And so education does play a major role in all these reform activities that we're doing. And I've always thought maybe what we probably need to change is the entire curriculum or how we view education in Nigeria. Maybe that also needs to sort of start to change ground up and all the way, because things are changing a lot. And that's, I kind of like what you guys are doing, online university, because people have to be able to now, learn remotely and all of that, and still work and learn and all that stuff. So things are changing rapidly, and the tools of learning itself needs to be learned and unlearned and all that. So it's very, very important that aspect, education plays that role. Healthcare is also another area that I think is waiting for massive reforms and for it to grow as well. And of course, you have all the mineral and all that, but I kind of feel, if you look at the service sector as in general, education, healthcare, very important to how all the other sectors are interconnected and how they grow. And so that's very key. Now to the final part of your question, what the government needs to do, I think, ask any regular Nigerian. People want access to credit. I think I mentioned that already. People want better infrastructure. Okay, road networks need to be built better. People need access to transportation. somebody who's living in people should be able to live in Ibadan and come to Lagos for work. It's just a 2-hour drive. So with a train, it should be 1 hour. It should happen. So you need to have more red lines, blue lines, green lines across. People need to see that. Those are the benefits of reforms that people need to see, right? Because if they don't see those things happening, then there's no benefit of reforms. People need housing, and that is why I actually like this hope agenda of the government, and then some of the initiatives like MREEF, right? Not sounding like I'm pro government like that, but I'm just saying those are some good policies that. So if you see those things, it's not by magic; they need to happen,
Right.
because if they don't happen, then these reforms make no sense.
Interesting what you're saying. So
Yes.
mitigating factors, it's not just putting money in people's accounts.
No.
They need to see the infrastructure.
Yes, that money needs to move. So that's why, Sim, you're going to be seeing, it's going to be a lot more difficult in the coming years to see idle assets, idle money. It's going to be a lot more difficult, because if you have an asset that is not producing, it's going to get taxed. And then when it gets taxed, nothing pains a rich man more than when you're taxing him for money that is not working, money that is just idle. So they want that money to move. And even globally as well, a lot of countries are also clamping down on idle assets.
Yeah.
In the UK now, in some parts of EU, gone are the days where you can just go and buy a home and hide money there. They will tax the heck out of you. So because they also realize that a lot of the money that's coming from Russia and some parts of Africa and Asia, a lot of that money pouring into Europe is also increasing asset prices in Europe. And so they're also considering taxes. I do hear that a lot of that money now is going to Dubai and all of that. But even they, at some point, it's just pure economics.
Yeah,
They will need to also increase. Yeah.
They already-
So that is happening. And so people will need to start to invest in those things. So I guess the point then is that we need to start to create structures for these things to happen. So, okay, if the private sector wants to get into transportation, what structure? If the private sector wants to get into massive infrastructure development, like massive roads, rail, bridges, tolls, what infrastructure, enabling infrastructure is there for them to ride? Because some of them will tell you, well, there are no assets, right? So that is also taking shape. There's a lot of reforms in the pension industry. A lot of people also are not aware of. Yeah, massive reforms there, because you do need to be able to pull funds from all over the country, right?
Sure.
Yeah, because when you pull funds, then that fund now starts to go into key areas of the economy that you want to develop. So I give you an example. One of the largest sovereign wealth funds or funds in Africa is in South Africa, the PIC. The PIC is the engine of South Africa's economic growth. So whether it's MTN or all this Standard Bank or their ports and all these if you go and check the shareholders, PIF is in there because they seeded all those companies. Likewise, Norway, likewise most other countries as well. And so that is what pension funds are going to be able to do. Today, most of our pension funds channel most of their money to government bonds. But that's not really what it's meant to be. You got to channel those money to solid private sector businesses that can drive it. But they also tell you that, well, they need scale. They need to see companies that are large enough. AAA that have transparency, right? And so it's a lot of work for everyone, which is why, we also internally, we had to come up with an index recently at Nairametrics. Yeah, we called it the NMX 100. And the whole idea was, okay, because we're doing one research and we said, we don't even know companies in Nigeria that generate revenues of 100 billion, because most of them they're not that transparent. So how do you know companies that are operating at that scale? And so we came up with that index, and so far, based on what is available online, data that we've seen, there are like 63 of them, which is just a drop in the bucket. There are probably a lot more, but we don't know, right? And nobody knows. So pension funds don't know. Mutual funds don't know. And these are the guys that have they are able to pool funds that they can invest in those kind of companies. So what happens today is that maybe I decide now, I want to buy, maybe they want to concession the Lekki Expressway or the Bagada Expressway, and I want to buy it. I'll just, go and form a consortium, put 2 or 3 of my friends. Nobody knows who we are. We just buy it. And then when we now buy it, we're not investing anything in there. It's just the entire package and all that. And then the thing just messes up. But if there were Transparency. These companies are big, they are listed, we know who they are, we know their directors, we know that then funds can pile behind those companies and then they can drive the infrastructure deficit that we have in Nigeria, which people put at maybe $20 billion, which is incredible.
Potential to accumulate the capital to bridge the infrastructure deficit.
Same, we have, if you look at the CBN data, money supply data today is at 130 trillion naira. That is money supply in Nigeria. So there's a lot of money that even the CBN is trying to mop.
Right.
So private capital does exist. We do need foreign money as well to come in to help. So
That's
but
one of those amazing things about Nigeria.
yeah, it does exist. So there's we do need FDI, which is not coming in at all. We need it, but private capital does exist to sort of jumpstart that investment that you need,
right?
Which is another of the reforms that we've seen, which is the monetary policy reform I've seen. I said earlier, one of the reasons why you've seen them tell banks to increase their share capital is also because there's a lot of money out there that is loose. And the way capitalism works, capitalism thrives when you're able to take money from the people that are not productive and move it to the people that are productive.
Yep.
That's how they sort of engineer these things. And so they had to get banks to take money out and then move it, take money from that money supply that has increased, right? So take that money and then give it to banks. And so that's why you've seen all of them essentially recapitalize. And shockingly as well, they've nearly all met their recapitalization. These guys have gone from from our latest data, banks have raised over 3 trillion already.
Look at that.
In under 2 years. In fact, most of them, it was meant to expire in March, but it's likely that they might not even extend it.
Wow.
Within 2 years. So in fact, the likes of Access and Zenith, they're done and dusted. GT is done and dusted. So these guys already, in terms of their share capital or just share capital, they're on like 500 billion.
Wow.
To put it into context, before then, there wasn't any bank. I don't think there was any that had a share capital of over 100 billion.
This is a question I want to ask you, Audrey, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
Since we have the privilege of having you here, I know it's a simplistic question, but to what degree do you think, and we've had rebasing and all of that, that there is still a delta between what we believe our GDP is, the real size of this economy?
What we believe our GDP is.
Do you think 400 billion, wherever it is now, we're about $380 billion, is reflective of the Nigeria?
Okay, so that's a good question. Yes. Yes. And I would also answer that. Aniekeme is saying, I also respond to that with the context of inflation, which is another thing that was rebased, right? Or maybe not rebased, but we did change the basket for determining inflation. So for GDP, rebasing has to happen every 5 years in an economy because economists believe that the way your economy is set up can change and tends to change every 5 years. In fact, because of technology, it probably changes faster than that now.
Absolutely.
And so the last time we did a rebasing was in 2014. And so think about it, between 2014 and 2025, the Nigerian economy has changed drastically. And let me give you an example. As at 2014, let's use MTN as an example. MTN's largest revenue driver was calls. Like calls. That was their largest revenue driver. Was making 70%, yes. And then we started seeing data double like every year in terms of data revenue growth. Now, MTN's largest revenue driver is data.
Of course.
Now, when you were calculating GDP back then, things like that are not factored into your economy. In fact, do you know what the size of education is? Just $1 trillion. So some people are like, 1 trillion?
It can't be.
Can't be. But based on our GDP, our entire education sector is not even up to $1 billion. Come on. So, and this is just based on current rebasing.
Just on our own.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't make
Yeah.
So this is just based on recent rebasing.
Huh.
And so it goes on and on. Because I remember my partner and I, we used to debate this a few years ago. Like, real estate can't be this small. At some point, real estate was like 4 trillion. It can't be.
Right.
It can't be, right? So rebasing does make sense. And then, of course, remember that they did also adjust the exchange rate as well, or devalue the naira. So that also has its own impact as well. So yes, to that extent, the economy, that rebasing had to happen, and it didn't even make as much difference as I even anticipated. Right, I thought that when they did that rebasing, we probably might be hitting $500 billion in terms of the size of our economy, but we did not. So I guess they were quite conservative with how they did it, because I think they're also a little bit worried with perception and the credibility of that whole process, and so they did not. But I think it's likely going to be done more often now. AI is not even part of our rebasing question, and even fintech, I don't even think they've even figured how to properly evaluate. And that's what I talk about transparency as well. Because if you don't see the revenues of tech companies, you don't see their volume numbers, because GDP is basically about volume.
Yeah.
GDP is volume. So they want to see the volume of your economy now compared to before. So if you don't have numbers of these companies, and it's difficult to really know what the size of your economy really is, so they sort of like just extrapolate here and there,
Right.
and then just sort of figure it out.
But how do you get those numbers? Particularly if a large chunk of these companies are private companies and they're not
Listed or
yes,
transferred, and that's a huge
they're not
problem.
required to disclose.
They're not.
We sold off so many times.
Yeah, they're not, and that's a big problem. But you know what? I mean, it's not the company's fault. It's up to the government to create an incentive for these companies to want to maybe list or be transparent, right? But we do need, that in our economy, because we do need to know the size of some of these companies. Just if it wasn't for a few years ago, nobody used to know NNPC revenues. But now NNPC, their recent numbers, when we had them on our NMX, as at 2024-23, they were on 26 or so trillion in terms of revenue.
Right.
But their recent numbers, they just released 2 weeks ago, 45 trillion.
Look at that.
Which is over $30 billion. So we do have a $30 billion revenue coming, and people even think maybe it's even understated. I don't know.
Yes.
Right. So that is just an example. And there are a lot of businesses that are like that. I mean, we have a lot of unicorns in Nigeria, and unicorns typically maybe your 10x revenue or 15x revenue and all of that. So if you even do a ballpark analysis, you will see that they're exactly. So you know that there are a lot of companies that are probably within that bracket. So government does need to, because if you don't have that information, it's often difficult to really know the size of your economy. Now, another aspect of rebasing was now inflation, which is why, which was the one that some people were not really sure, because we went from 34% to 26 to 20, from 36% to 26% within a month. So December 2024, we're on 36. Then by January 2025, we're on 26% because of what they did with the basket, which is fine as well. And so what some people do though is, because we're on 16.05%, if you really wanted to be conservative, you can just, add 10% to it. Some guys do and say, okay, maybe that's really where the inflation is and all that. And maybe that's even what the CBN is doing, because the CBN did not cut interest rate the last time, because they are worried that, cutting interest rate too fast might just spoil the reforms that we're having. But to your point, yes, the economy should be larger than it is at the moment. I think there's potential to grow. Now, whether we hit that 1 trillion is a different thing, because that also depends on the exchange rate stability as well. Because if you use the exchange rate at 2014, at the height of when you were in Kunga, I'm sure that we're probably $1 trillion now. Just do the math, right? Exactly. So that also has an impact. So that's why when I hear that $1 trillion economy, I'm like, or what exchange rate, okay? Just tell us.
That's the
Are you going to use to determine whether we're there or not? So, but I guess it's a catchphrase for government officials now, and so it suits them.
Yeah, and why does it matter? Why does like the size of the GDP and this like $1 trillion economy? Why does it matter? Why did you ask that?
Well, no, it has huge implications.
A lot.
Some markets think of for your geopolitical power, for your FDI. A lot of these things
Yeah.
are self-fulfilling kind of,
Right.
feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, it has huge implications.
Investor confidence, all of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Just want the audience to understand. Okay. Our time is tracking pretty well, I would say. I suspect we have some questions from the audience that we'll take a little later. But just a few more questions. As we just talked about this rebasing of the GDP and like the sectors and even the components within sectors that have changed, right, between 2014 when this was last done and now. What do you think then in the next 5 years will be the sectors that will power the growth of the Nigerian economy? Like what is going to lead the pack? What will be number 2? Like what do you think that component of the pie is going to look like?
So let me answer. So this will sharpen my thinking. If I was going to invest in corporate bonds or equities, what would I be investing in? Part of this is because I'm an older man now. GC has gray hair, so I think power.
Okay.
I think energy. Really bullish on energy. I think actually also because of the PIB. And it's just after effects, I think our oil industry is going to do really well.
Okay.
I would say infrastructure. I think we're going to start to see much more sort of large-scale project finance.
Okay.
Where Aniekeme puts together a credible consortium and you look to build a new airport or a new port in Warri or
Railway.
the case maybe, that would be big. And then, of course, tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a global kind of story that's unfolding, and Nigeria is no exception. And under tech, there's healthcare and education and all of these things. But if I had to pick one segment, I would say energy. I would say power.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, Aniekeme. So I was just looking at my data table here because you touched on one of my favorite conversations, which is how Nigerian economy has grown over the years. So, go back to 2016, trade was the largest subsector in the economy, and it was followed by crop production, and then telecoms, real estate, and then crude petroleum. So those were like the 5. And if you come to 2023, it was then crop, trade, telecom. So crop essentially toppled trade, telecom still in there, and then construction from nowhere jumps into the top 4, and then food, beverage, and tobacco. Okay, top 5 now becomes top 5 economy. Now last year, 2024, it was crop production still there, trade still there, real estate now comes in as number 3, and then telecoms, and then livestock. So it's very interesting to see how the economy is, or how things shape up in an economy.
This is
every year.
Security issues.
Everything. That's it. Trade, crop, real estate, telecoms, livestock. And so, what sectors do you need to look out for? Construction still there because of the need for infrastructure development. So that is going to be one sector that you will see track. For perspective, construction based on the current GDP rebase, 16 trillion. Flashback to 2016, it was just 3.6 trillion. So you can see in like 10 years, construction has like more than quadrupled.
Construction includes housing, infrastructure, roads.
Yeah, so it's mostly roads, rails, and all of that. So not housing,
real estate.
Real estate, yeah.
Okay.
Real estate, yeah. So then you would expect to start to now see, I expect to see healthcare, jump at least into the top 10. Currently not in the top 10. I expect to see education as well creeping. Education has had a bit of a challenge. Education is 20 at the moment. I think it was, if I checked the last, it was in the top maybe 16 or 15 or so, but it's fallen to 20. But you need to see education needs to creep in. Healthcare as well needs to be there. Power, shockingly, has been bottom for a bit. Yes, I'm not even sure power is in the top 20 at the moment. Yeah, it came in a few years ago, but it's dropped out. And that then tells you why our economy is not creating the amount of jobs that you think it should create.
Right.
Because the real job creators are not the major drivers of your economy. So again, what did I say at the top? Crop production, which is farming, but farming income is not a lot.
It's not.
Right? It's not substantial. Yeah. So that's why there's a lot of people who were really against Buhari's agricultural policy, which I thought was fairly okay. Hated it because they thought that they were putting so much energy in a sector of the economy that in terms of productivity or in terms of wages was not significant.
ROI.
Exactly. Yeah. So crop, then you now have trade, okay, which we all know has been Nigeria's bread and butter for a bit. You now have real estate, you now have telecom, so services, and they don't need to employ a lot of people for them to grow. So when you now have manufacturing and all that, in fact, if you split the economy into three, the economy is usually like three major subsectors: services, agri, and industrials. So industrials is at least about 20% or so of the economy. Services is about nearly half the economy.
Right.
And so that's why you're not getting this sort of impact that you should be having, because if industrials or manufacturing was a huge part of the economy, then all your textile industries will be working, all your people who fabricate and produce things will be working. A lot of all this equipment we all have here will be made in Nigeria, and all of that, and manufacturing. Yeah, so that is where, again, the government, if they are really serious about this so-called $1 trillion economy, that's where a lot of the work needs to happen.
Right. And I think it's I want to tie back to what you said earlier, something that you mentioned that I think we're all aware of. With Nigeria's youth population, we're adding about 5 million potential workers to the workforce every year. Thesis that I had, at least at the beginning of the year, and I still kind of am holding on to, is what has driven some other countries' economies, India, the Philippines, with being able to outsource some of their youth population to services, like business process outsourcing services. And that's then becoming a significant part of that country's GDP and the way that that country has actually risen from poverty into a more prosperous nation. What do you think about that with respect to Nigeria, especially now looking at the list of
you make a very great point, Aniekeme, because I agree that, in fact, some of us have always said that Nigeria is so strategically located in the equator, I think that's the word, right, that there's no reason why we shouldn't be the outsourced country for the world, right? We shouldn't be competing with India. And that brings me back to what I said earlier about education. So that's why, if I was in government, this is education. The educational sector is one sector that you put a lot of energy behind it, because it is such a primary driver of capital for your economy and it's huge that you can't even and it's easy capital. What I mean by easy capital is, imagine if you had a huge part of our youth population very skilled, because that's what is important, because the reason why we can't compete with India is that we're not as skilled as they are. So we're very skilled. Then you can be in Nigeria, and Nigeria can be sweet sometimes, especially if you're making money. True. There's one argument I had with some guys earlier. I said, in Nigerian that earns $10,000.
Oh, is a king in the States.
hold on, hang on. In Nigeria that earns $10,000 but lives in Nigeria lives way more better than its equivalent in the US. In fact, you actually even live better than somebody who's earning 10 times your pay.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because of cheap labor and all of all those things. And so
in Southeast Asia, where Europeans and North Americans will actually move
there, for
to
local
Thailand or move
exactly.
to Vietnam or Costa Rica.
And they just walk out of those places, right? So if we had that kind of skill, then a lot of people can be in Nigeria, working in Nigeria, earning abroad, impacting your economy, right? Because I mean that money gets spent here, and then you now don't need to killing yourself trying to get FDIs or the wrong kind of FDIs or the wrong kind of FPIs, which is foreign portfolio investments, into your country at such exorbitant rates. Because today, one of the reasons why we even have this stable exchange rate is because we have FPIs, foreign portfolio investments, and they are all buying all our fixed income securities at very high interest rates, which is quite expensive to sustain. So, but if you had a lot of our skilled labor here serving the entire global market, because we are well positioned, think about it, our time zone is great, right? So we're just sometimes we're in the same time zone with the UK, or the same time zone,
definitely more neutral than South Asia.
Exactly.
Correct.
So when they are sleeping in the when they are maybe up in the or midway in Southeast Asia, we are up already in Nigeria, and then we are waiting for the US to come. When they are coming up, we're still up at about 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Do you understand? So we can serve, and the weather is not bad here, such that we can even walk into the night. So it's not like you're worried about. So there's a lot of advantages that we have, and then of course we speak English here, and our English is not. I mean, with due respect to the Indians, I think it's kind of better than.
The accent,
Indians, right? More, accent wise and all that. You can probably hear us better. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be. Rather, it now appears that we're even losing some of that advantage to the likes of Rwanda, okay, which are like way smaller economy compared to us. So that's my response to your question.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Ugodre. Thanks, Sim. I think we're going to get some questions from so we'll take some questions here, and then we'll take some questions from our online audience. So cool. You have a question? Okay.
Moderator. Thank you for this discussion. We discussed about industry policies and the energy policies and how it has impacted Nigerians, especially the citizens, because the purchasing power has actually gone down.
Yeah.
The problem is coming up.
Yeah.
And also, government is having so much fault. And my question is, what areas should the government, especially state governments, what areas should they have invested for it a big impact that will support the domestic regulation, which is a growth stage? I also want to thank you for bringing to the fore that education is actually the driver of economic.
Yes, very clear and very good question, Prof. Because I think it's important that these things are properly channeled to the right people. There is one mistake I think state governments often make, and maybe it's knowingly or unknowingly, and that is to always think that the best way to show that you're working is by building roads and bridges and all of this. They're fine. Don't get me wrong. Everybody wants roads to their villages and all that. But the question I often ask is, what's really the point spending 3 billion or 4 billion on a 10-kilometer road, and then the left and right of those, the road sometimes, let's even say it's even a 2-kilometer road within a city, and then the real estate around it is just thatched roofs or dilapidated buildings and all that. So what that just tells you is that there's a lot of money that's gone into building those roads, but people are not really empowered. You've made transportation easier, but that's just one aspect of factors of production. So whilst that is important, because I'm not saying they should not do that, while that is important, I think state governments need to start to ask themselves why they exist. So why does my state exist? When you start to ask yourself questions like that, you then start to elicit answers that positions your state as a different state. So if I was in Lagos State, why does Lagos State exist? Oh, well, it's the economic capital of Lagos and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what then that means is, well, since it's the economic capital of Nigeria, then provide the infrastructure for businesses to continue to thrive, right? Especially banks and financial services and all that. Okay, but maybe you're in Abia State, for example, right? Why does my state exist? Well, if you go back in history, we are very good with production, with, made in Nigerian stuff and all that. Okay, I want to make my state an industrial state. The industrial hub of the South or the Southeast or of Nigeria in general. And so what do you then do to achieve that? Create an enabling environment. So tell manufacturing companies that you're going to give them incentives. You're going to create roads to their plants. You're going to create roads to their logistics services. You're going to create cargo airports and things that basically just make companies want to locate within your region. Or why does Ogun State exist? Okay, you know what? I want to be educational hub, right? So long as you want to have state-of-the-art schools in this place, then I'm going to construct my state. I'm going to basically arrange my state in a way to suit that economy. Because what then that happens is that, okay, once everybody knows that, also, so long as you want to set up a school, this is the area to go to, then they now know that the economy survives on schools, and so economy survives on hostels. So people now come in and build a lot of hostels and build a lot of services for schools and universities and all that. And that's the lifeblood of your economy. Do you understand? So why does your state exist? Oh, farming, fine. Then create the entire factors of production that will drive farming. So every state they've got to ask themselves and be realistic about it. Because I see some states and say, oh, want to be a technological hub. What does that mean? What does technological hub mean? Like, is that really what your states need now? You just set up tech this, tech that. Yeah. No, maybe that's not where you should be. Think of something else that your states can do. You can even say, you know what, I want to be the EV state of Nigeria. And all I want to do is that as long as you want to do anything, battery, solar, it's here. So I think that has to be the natural direction for a lot of states, even when they are spending money on infrastructure. So that infrastructure has to be within that mindset. We're spending infrastructure to enable education in Ogun State because that's really our focus, or want to enable textiles or whatever. But state can say, you know what, like Akwa Ibom, for example, today, everybody, whenever Super Eagles play, is always in Uyo. Oh, okay, you know what? We want to make Akwa Ibom the state. When it comes to sports, so long as it comes to hosting events and all that, this is where you want to be. Whether it's golf tournaments, whether it's car racing, and then every single thing that they are building, infrastructure and roads and all that, is all aligned towards that direction. So I kind of feel that's where it really should go. Some will say, well, it's possible because they try to do it I remember in Cross River with Tinapa and all that, and another governor comes in and just scatters everything, continuity and all. That is a different debate. But again, it all depends on what the state, because the state government should be able to do your own internal meetings with your citizens and ask yourself this question. Do your own polls, do your own voting. What should we really be as a state? And then I kind of think if you have the buy-in of the people, right? The buy-in of the people, it's going to be difficult for another government to come and want to spoil it.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you do all this, you have, everybody come in, referendums and all that, and you have serious discussions. What do we want our state to be? Yeah. And then you have that discussion and everybody buys into it. It becomes like, it can even become a law. They can actually sign it as an act. You know what? This is where we want. And then that's, so to me, that was my response to your question.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's much, you can ask for.
Right.
Absolutely right. It's definitely not a lack of resources. There's a lot of money now. I think what Ugodre, if I can just sort of, from my point of view, understand what you want to do, understand the economy you want to build, and then just figure out those stakeholders and find how to increase their revenues or reduce their expenses,
Right.
and just make it easy for them to operate. If you look at Plateau, so I did this survey across Plateau South recently, just for my own curiosity. And it's a very simple question that we asked, is like, what are your problems? We didn't try to put them in buckets or classify them. And in every single ward across about 6 local governments, 2 items came up. It was either number 1 or number 2. It was either bad political leadership or an absence of electricity. And so, if you take a state like that, you've got 200 wards. I don't understand why 200 kilowatts of solar power are not going into every ward. Because if you do the numbers, we can afford it.
Yeah.
And the impact will be, I mean, you can't say, you can't overuse this word in this context. It will be revolutionary. But this is just not happening. So we're kind of stuck with the flyovers and the roads. A lot of this is kind of overhang and just momentum.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just lack of creativity. I mean, if we say, I can, charity, because I talk more about my state. If we're a tourist state, I've talked to hotel owners in Jos, for example, which is a great place where more people in Nigeria should be vacationing. More Lagosians should be going to Jos for vacation instead of thinking about going abroad.
Correct.
But I don't believe anybody has called the hotel owners to
Speak to them about.
to talk strategy.
Yeah.
Rather, all they do is just want to milk them.
Yeah.
If you speak to hotel owners today, you say, look, man, every state government comes up with one tax or the other just to essentially extort the hotel owners. And they're like, what did we do?
Exactly.
Right? So then that's the point. How do you like Plateau State now, saying, we've got a whole lot of history around the state. Let's make this a tourist attraction deliberately. That's all we want to do here. That's what we want to be known for.
Yes, yes.
We don't bother. You say tourism.
Yeah.
So what then that automatically means is, if you're coming to set up a car manufacturing plant, something as crazy as that, for example, then you're doing that to service the tourism industry.
Yeah.
So okay, the people you're trying to service, so because you're doing a manufacturing plant there, you're probably trying to service car rental companies and all of that, because that's the lifeblood of that economy.
Yeah.
Tourism. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that's my point.
I mean, I think your response to our VC Prof's question was just fantastic, and Sim, your input to it, just because you can see this happen, and I don't want to always use other examples, but in the States, even in China, there's states within those countries that are known for specific things.
Exactly.
So when you're talking about strategy, creativity, focus, I feel like it really is what's lacking in the way that states are planning and then using the funds that they now have even more at their disposal.
Yeah, I think we just need to see more leadership, creativity, engaging with stakeholders, more responsibility. Even in this post-electricity reform Nigeria, I believe there's over a dozen states that have not taken control of their own electricity value chains till today.
Yeah.
They haven't passed state-level laws, which just doesn't make any sense to me. So I think there's some of that going on. And like Ugodre was saying, I mean, then you get into continuity. When you look at Lagos and Akwitti, just your state, these are 2 states that I think most people will agree have sort of outperformed the rest of Nigeria. And the common thing across those 2 states is this continuity. In fact, Lagos is really impressive because I believe every governor since President Tinubu was governor served in the cabinet.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
And so you have this, and the same thing happened, similar thing happened in Akwitti. So it's interesting, but I think it's vision, it's lack of continuity, it's just political competition drowning out everything, and hopefully some of that will start to change going forward.
Right. Okay. I've received questions from our online audience, so I'm just going to take a couple of them while being cognizant of time. I'm going to read them as written. So Favor Linus asked, what sector of the economy does Nigeria need to diversify to improve the economy?
But I would say power till he wheeled out his data. Yeah, no, I mean, I think diversification is happening already. I would answer that question a bit differently. I think we need enabling infrastructure. You know, one project I would love to see this administration undertake, or at least start it, because they likely will finish it. Not because it's not as a singular project, but just because of what it would mean to Nigeria and our national spirit and pride, and just the sheer scale of it, is that Mandela Power project. I mean, it just remains a dream in the spirit of Nigeria that I feel like we need to realize that project.
Yeah.
So, and again, Mambila is just symbolic, but, you know, I think power as a whole feeds a lot of things.
Yeah, just chime in as well. I mean, Nigeria, we have over 40 or so subsectors, so the economy is pretty much diverse. There probably should even be more sectors created from there. I mean, for example, creative and arts is just some tiny sector in the entire subsector of Nigeria, and we all know how arts and entertainment have grown over the years. So, but just to also ride on Sim's point, rather than what sectors do we need to sort of, you know, focus on, there are sectors already. I really don't like government in business like that. I think maybe the person's point is, where do we need government to sort of focus on in terms of supporting growth in the sector here? And I think I mentioned education as one. I mentioned healthcare as one, because if at the end of the day it's human beings that will do all this work, right? And then power is, I guess, the next one. And we've just gotten it so wrong, so bad over the years. I mean, I've been involved in it at one of the highest level at some point in my career as well. So I know the challenges of power in Nigeria, and the challenges of power, it's also the challenges of Nigeria as a nation. And let me explain. If there's one thing that we really can't do, is centralized utilities. I don't know why it's such a big problem here. And let me give you an example. We don't have centralized water in Nigeria. So I tend to call it the borehole mentality. So the borehole mentality is that everybody sinks a borehole, right? And that's how it works.
Yes.
Because we don't have centralized power. We don't centralized water. We don't have centralized sewage. We don't have centralized power. It can't work. So that's why centralized power, it's going to be difficult to work, because there's just the way Nigeria is just sort of set up, right? So it's set up to make doing things centrally work. That's why federal universities and all, they suffer, because when it comes to doing centralized things, it requires moving parts, everything to work together, and we're not at that efficient level government wise. Do you know what I mean? So that is why even for private sector to try, most of the successful private sectors in Nigeria have been successful because they have found a way to not depend on government and even other parts of the economy to function. Dangote Refinery is functioning today because, apart from the fight, so in fact the fight's this same problem I'm talking about, centralization, because he needs to rely on the government to give him crude. But he's even been able to succeed largely because he owns his own land, he provides his own power, provides his own logistics. Remember, even provides his own trucks.
Yeah.
You see that? So the likes of MTN were able to survive. In fact, one of MTN's biggest moats and why they were able to jump past the other telcos was because early on they started out building towers across the country. They invested heavily in that early on, so they owned their own distribution channel. So that's been the problem with Nigeria. So having a centralized system is so, same. I agree with Mambila Power Project is big. You can have a million megawatts of power anywhere or whatever. It's not going to work because that power plant needs to be distributed. It's not going to distribute itself. So you can generate all the power you want. You're going to be able to transmit that power or across huge transmission lines, and then you've got to be able to distribute it. So what it then means is that as I'm investing heavily in generating power, I have to be sure that the guy on the downstream is also investing in being able to receive that power and distribute it. It's almost as if you decide now you want to set up a Tesla plant here in Nigeria. It's not going to work. It's not that you can't set up Tesla plant here, but to set up Tesla plant in Nigeria, you do need electricity because you need to get charged, right? So that's how it works. You can't set up a university if you don't have students, right? You can build an edifice of a school, but if you don't have students who are learning, then it doesn't work, and you don't have how you actually get them to learn. So that's where distribution comes. So that's the problem of centralization in Nigeria, and it's a big issue. So for me, they need to get that power right, but to get it right, they need to really get their mind off this centralization thing. I had the commissioner of power in Lagos on one of my podcasts, and I told him clearly, I said it's not going to work. And interesting was both of us had a debate some years ago about this, when he was all on about, reforms.
Proposing that.
So they also want this centralized, but even though, to be fair to him, he did also at some point admit that, he does agree that we do need to have some decentralized power at some point. And his point was that there's got to be a time when Yaba, for example, should not be affected by what's happening in Ikeja.
Right.
Yeah.
Yapa should just have its own central everything. Now, the problem with that is it's expensive because scale reduces price. But you know what? We're not there yet. Let's just understand that. I always tell people Nigeria has 24.
We're functioning on diesel generators.
That's what I'm saying now. Nigeria has 24/7 power. People just say we have. Just go and buy your generator or turn it on forever. Just the point is the light will not blink. But the reason why people say we don't have is because it's expensive, isn't it? But if you put your gen here now and just make sure that there's always diesel, it will not blink. It will be looking at you because power doesn't have anywhere to go to. It'll just be looking at you. So the problem is expensive. So that's why I talk about decentralization. So that has to be the mindset, and which also speaks to Prof. VC's question about what state governments should do. So they need to start to think about these things because Nigeria just has its own idiosyncrasy. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just how we, Nigeria is not like any other country. So understand that. I hope it's not my point I'm saying that you go. What's up?
Because I under her cough saying that's not my problem. Why don't they have gas and they've gone here, they're doing this fine.
We still have ways to go. Not quite one. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Sim. Wow. Thanks, Ugodre. Something has happened to my voice. but
Bring
we're
it
gonna
on.
keep
Who
going.
else?
Sorry, Aniekeme.
It's okay, thank you. Okay, so Anthony, we're back. Anthony has asked a couple questions, so I'm just gonna lump them all together to ask. He asked, as a customer, how can I restore my credit? Something about paying his loans, but yet most fintechs and banks refuse to give him credit. That's one part of his question.
Good question.
Another part is, it's still about restoring his credit. And he thinks other people will benefit from your answers to that question. And then the third one is, what ways do you think that the youth can rise above the poverty line to begin to benefit from most of these policies, either through business, work, education?
In fact, let me start from that second question, because that second question is very important. The first was what again? Was credit, right? No.
Yes.
The second one is very important, and I always tell some of my mentees that information is power. It's currency. The biggest problem with a lot of you today is they are consuming the wrong information too much. There's nothing wrong in watching all those funny skits. We all love them. all those music, we like them. The stress is too much, or you want to laugh. But you have to also look for information. Like, you have to deliberately look for information that supports your condition in life today. So you see, well, how can you see a young person of 25, 26-year-old, and you ask that person, have you heard of MRIF before? Say, waiting me that. Have you heard of NHF? Waiting me that. Have you heard what?
Yeah.
You gotta know, because those policies are created for you. So you're 25, 26, with some of these MRIFs or whatever, you can actually get a loan at 9%, and you don't even need to live in the house you own.
Yeah.
You can go and just buy one 2-bedroom house in Yanokpaja or somewhere in Ogun State or wherever, and then at 27, 28, you're already a landlord, and then the rent in that you're getting from there is augmenting the rent you're paying here.
Yeah.
And then within 5 years, the appreciation you get there becomes equity to buy a bigger house. Like, that's what I think they really have to be doing, because in this sort of economy, information really, really matters. You see, even going abroad, Aniekeme, see, you can have, and I'm sure we all have them, you have 3 friends who went abroad about the same time. Why do you think one person is successful and the other person is not? It's information. It depends on how you essentially are brought into that economy. So that's why abroad now, in fact, there's a friend of mine who we're thinking of starting some kind of mentorship. And I'm like, mentorship for people that just jackpot? What's that? They said, oh, they there. That's what they told me. They there. That's because people have figured that the cost of not understanding an economy early on is so huge.
Yeah. It is.
Right? For example, there's some people, you come into an economy, you sell all your house in Nigeria and you travel abroad, and then maybe you go and maybe start rent, or you go and buy a house in some neighborhood that you don't need and all that, not knowing that maybe what you need to first of all do is maybe buy a house that has a flat, and then you here, and then the rent is on, like, different tricks around it. So it's similar here as well. So they have to be very, very exposed and consume a lot of information. You're even in an information age now, not like in our own time where there wasn't a lot of information. But now there is so much. There are YouTubers everywhere that are also producing very good educational content. That's cool, like yours. So to me, that's the way. There's nothing else. It's not, because when they say cut soap for me, that's the cutting soap. That person cutting soap for the whole idea of cutting soap is not information. Is it now? Tell me. That's what it means. So that's what I'm telling you. So the information is out there. You got to find it. Now, to credit, now is not the time to. The message the central bank has been telling us the last 2 years is that now is not the time to borrow. Yeah. So credit is not what they're encouraging at the moment, at the large scale. So banks will not lend to you right now because there's just no incentive to lend to you.
Right.
So it's a monetary policy by design, which one of the reforms I told you. So that is why lending or borrowing at the moment is difficult, and it will keep being difficult until next year. We think it's going to ease next year. So for the guy that's asking questions about why am I not getting credit, just wait till next year. In fact, any credit you get now is expensive. You're going to be paying like 6% per month. If you're lucky to get an annual interest, you're paying at 36%. Come on now. How much is equity returns itself, which they say is more expensive than debt. So it's not a good time, and that's why that person will not be able to get
a line of credit.
will not be able to get a line of credit. So just next year will be a lot better because we expect interest rates to come down, and then once interest rates starts to come down and then CBN relaxes some of its monetary policy tools, then credit will flow. I'm thinking that in another 3 years we might see credit at the level it was in Obasanjo region. Let me explain. Do you remember there was a time during Obasanjo that I'm sure we all remember when if you wanted to buy a plasma, I think it was plasma that was reading a plasma TV or KRE or one of those things, I use TV because it's even the most basic of consumption things. If you go to one of those, is it Fuani or one of those places, you can give them a four postdated check, four checks or 6 checks, and they will give you those things. Yeah, it was happening. If all you need to do is just work in a recognized company. The checks was so for them, your check was as honorable as the people. So imagine now that we have technology and they know your NIN, BVN, and they can do direct debits on you and blah 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 blah. So that's the explosion I was telling you about that's gonna happen next with credit. And so for that chap, just maybe this time next year you might want to try. So for now, maybe go and look for friends and family to give you money.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's absolutely right. So, I'm involved in education. I've become so aware of this thing. It's like the content you consume, whether it's on social media or YouTube, on TV, it's a form of education. It's like you're literally installing software in your mind. So you have to be very careful about what you consume and how much time you spend consuming that. Over the past few months, I've been telling a lot of my friends that are younger that you need to be very deliberate. Social media it's incredibly well designed to sync your time.
Yes.
And your productivity.
Yeah.
And it's useful. Like Ugodre was saying, you're stressed, you want to laugh at a little video. But you have to also be able to see something and say, I'm not going to click on that.
Right.
So there's the information part. And then you also have to be very deliberate to watch Nairametrics and watch it's useful. And
I like that cheap plug.
it's very valuable content.
Yeah.
But I think also, and maybe this is also just sort of connected to a sign of the times. I wouldn't necessarily advise that young person to invest in one sector or the other. I would tell him 2 things. Maybe it's a bit cliche. The first is, never discount the power of starting small.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the people that you see that are doing well, however you define doing well, whether it's ultra wealthy or comfortable, in their middle age, it's just compounding. It's not that they're necessarily smarter than you. They just compounded over 20, 30 years. So that by the time they get into their 60s, the wealth is just, it's exploding.
Yeah.
Literally, it's just compounding. And that compounds up of a very small base. And tied to that also is just, deferring your consumption today, which is something, again, it's a sign of the times. I know everybody wants to consume everything today. And that's a massive problem for young people today. The young people that can master this notion of compounding and deferring enjoyment for tomorrow and using their time well and kind of using social media in a very deliberate way, I think will run circles around everybody else over the next 10, 20 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. We'll take just one more question from the online audience. Anonymous asked, what could be done for more transparency to be seen in government reform, bring about direct impact on the average Nigerian, and translate to money and developmental impact that is visible?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, if there's one thing you can criticize this government for is their communication. I think rather than focus on communicate constructively, they tend to communicate combatively. So they're typically combative in their communication. It's as if they're just fighting you. Like, dude, just communicate. You don't have to react to everything. We understand that in this social media world is who abuses more that tends to win, right? But I think being able to properly communicate, government policies is very important, especially the ones that are super beneficial. They do communicate in some cases, but maybe not well enough. And then, some might say, well, that also comes with a lot of trust deficits.
Yeah.
Because when they do try to communicate, people also maybe don't believe, but they need to communicate, and not just audio communication like we say sometimes. It's communicating with a lot of data. Nigerian government, successive governments, even across the current one, they're very poor at using data to communicate results because, I mean, facts just shut you up,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, and there's no, PDP or APC or whatever, ADC or whatever, when it comes to facts, right? Because you're communicating facts. So I think that is what needs to happen a lot more. There are some government agencies that are doing that. I think NEL Fund, which is also another agency that a lot of students should pay attention to. Yeah. So there's some that tend to communicate, things like number of, states where people are applying for these funds, so that you can know that your state is lagging behind, and also those sort of information is very important. And I guess that speaks to that question. So yeah, they need to be better at communicating, because that way, then we can know where the opportunities are and how to latch on them, so that it's not just communication in some narrow view. And I don't know why, for some reason, the government also thinks that all Nigerians are on X. I don't know why.
And then the community.
Yeah, they just once they just posting on X, they just believe that everybody has seen it, right? Like, really? There are probably more Nigerians on WhatsApp than
Facebook
than on X, right? Yeah. So it's all that communication and how they do it, and having constant town hall meetings, physical communication, town hall meetings, and all that stuff, very important, so that you're also getting feedback at all levels of governance. I think that's what needs to happen for people to start to feel this impact.
You're right. I mean, maybe it's not so much transparency, but it's just expecting more from our leaders. I think that's very important. And then I'm asking some questions. If the intention of the political elite was to kind of have the electorate not think and not ask questions, and instead worship people and praise them for having meetings and taking pictures, then it's worked out. It's a perfect system. And that's why we blame our leaders many times for a lot of what's wrong with our society, and I think rightly so. But I think a lot of the blame also falls on us when I see, young people or the electorate praising, worshiping people for just basically doing their job.
Right.
Yeah. Or not asking what the source of, somebody has been in public service their entire life, and yet owns, properties and high value, cars and vehicles, and nobody's asking this, just how, and instead we are actually, and if you're praising that person, make no mistake, you are collaborating with that person. So, that is our own collective responsibility. It's almost like a spiritual shift, if I can put it like that. Like, we need to stop that behavior.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how, because it's gone on since time immemorial.
Yeah.
In this part of the world, but it needs to go away.
So, agreed. So, just to close us out, because we're at time, and this has been such an engaging conversation. Yeah. I'd love for Sim, Ugodre, for you guys, if right now this is December 2025, right? Imagine we're having this conversation again in December 2028. So a cycle of election. Yeah, not too far, but far enough that we should have seen some things happen.
Yeah.
What is the key takeaway that you would want to give then, not now? Like at the end of that conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. But I want him to go first. He's more pragmatic than
Key takeaway to see by 2028. I think by 2028 we would have had either the current president in his second term, or we'll have a new leader in place. I think for me, the key takeaway will be two-pronged. So for regular Nigerians, it's basically how's the reform going? If you look at where you are today, 2025, versus where you are in 2028, have you seen much progress in your life, or have you regressed? Now, as much as you ask that question, you also need to say to yourself, how many of this was my fault?
Yeah.
And how many of this was not my fault, right? Because it's very possible that everybody's moving forward, and then you're just stagnant because you've not processed information well, like I mentioned earlier. So I think that's one thing that I'll expect a lot of people to look at. And then for government, I think data. How what sort of inflation numbers are we at in 2028? If we're not below 10%, then you got to see that as a failure. In terms of economic growth, if we're not at 6-7% at that time, you got to see it as a failure, because we can't be running 3-4%. It's not strong enough to lift people out of the poverty line. I'm talking about poverty rate has to have dropped. So those benchmarks must be clear. Purchasing power must be improved. Sim's point as well, people must have a lot more access to electricity, whether it's decentralized or centralized. State government was more accountable. Insecurity should have dropped. So that is what, if we're looking at if we're here in 2028 and we're trying to look back, these are the things that we're looking at. We're saying, okay, these have happened. And then, what we're now looking at is how positioned are we, or where are we when it comes to, technological advancement, which is where that's what most advanced countries are talking about now. Nobody's talking about electricity and stuff. They're talking about, where is AI spending going to, which industry, robotics and all those sort of things. And where are we in that conversation? Those are the things that we will now be discussing.
Okay.
No, I think I don't know. Again, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, we've talked about a lot today, and I know that our viewers here and online have learned so much from both you, Sim, and Ugodre. I have as well. This has been such an engaging conversation. It's been an honor to moderate this conversation.
And you did well.
Thank you so much. And to be doing it from Miva Open University's Lagos Center in our beautiful co-working space. So thank you again, everyone who joined us online. And we will see you in the next edition of an academic or cultural discourse that we're having at Miva Open University. Thanks again, Sim. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. Are we still on?
Thank you.
Good one.
Good.
Yeah.